Hey everyone, Sky here to discuss Shutter Island, or as I like to call it, Shutter Island. What do you want to go there for? Starring Leonardo DiCaprio, Mark Ruffalo, Ben Kingsley, Michelle Williams, Max von Sydow, Patricia Clarkson, Emily Mortimer, and Jackie Earle Haley, directed by Martin Scorsese. Now I remember going to theaters for this thing, and what did I think of it? Well, it was different. It's going to be different compared to what I thought now, but I should say something before I start the show. I've already reviewed The Wolf of Wall Street, so I'm not going to do it again. But I did review it right after I did the Wall Street series. So you can look further down for it if you want to find out what my review of that film is like. So let's get into this movie. In 1954, in the middle of the ocean, Teddy Daniels, played by Leonardo DiCaprio, is seasick and walks outside and meets his partner Chuck Owl, played by Mark Ruffalo. As this is a strange way to meet your partner for the first time, like, couldn't they have met before they set sail? And immediately I know there's something up with Teddy as far as the twist is concerned, as this felt familiar to me. And the background of when Teddy and Chuck talk on the water looked very green screen. They arrive in Shutter Island which is at a mental hospital for the criminally insane, which was telling, which was told to me from the trailers. And they get to the mental hospital as this movie is well shot and made. And I like the set of the mental hospital as it looks like a nice hospital. The assignment the two federal marshals to find an escaped convict named Rachel Solando, who killed three of her children, as they meet with Dr. Cawley, played by Ben Kingsley, whom I first saw the movie was as the villain of the movie. Well, that's what I thought at first, because he plays often the villain. But come on, how often is our psychiatrist the villain of the story in any movie? In real life. So this movie felt very obvious in some levels. Like, I know Teddy is up to something weird, which will be the twist at the end of the movie. And I guessed it rather too early because there's more of an explanation of this Rachel Solando, as is not the plot of the movie. It's Teddy acting rather crazy from the opening scene. The marshals find a note from Rachel that says the law of four, who is 67. As it comes to nighttime, Teddy asks Dr. Cawley to speak with the staff and other patients, and is it just me or was this script scribbled? And Scorsese is trying to make sense of it because this is a mess of a story so far. They speak to the staff, including Glenn, who abandoned his post during the clock, and they didn't see her leave the place, and the staff is rather treating the marshals like a joke, while Dr. Cawley takes it rather seriously, which is making me think there's something wrong here. As is this meant to be funny? Because I thought it was supposed to be serious. The marshals meet another psychiatrist named Dr. Let me see if I'm saying the name right. Nearing, played by Max von Sydow, who's another actor who I thought was the villain, as he always plays the villain, with an exception of The Exorcist, of course. And the editing was sometimes off, as we briefly go back and forth between the talking to the doctors and Teddy in World War II. And I thought, what the fuck is going on with that? As the shots, like that bothered me too often, as it bothered me in a couple of Danny Boyle films, as it bothered me here, as well as this movie happens to often in pairs. And that's another thing that did annoy the shit out of me. And the characters are fine, but Leo needs to lose the accent. Teddy sometimes has dreams of his wife, Dolores, played by Michelle Williams, and their two little girls going into ash as the room ashes, as well as the ash falling down is a well acted scene, as well as it was pulled off very well. Teddy wakes up from the dream as the rain falls on his face as the storm is occurring, and Teddy and Chuck interview everyone in the group therapy as one lady is drinking water off screen as it was full of water, and next shot, the cup was empty. And these shots in this scene bothered me, like Teddy writing on the piece of paper and it was bugging the shit out of some prisoner or patient, excuse me, I forgot about that. And is that a choice that Scorsese made? Because it was pulled off rather poorly, and the performances are good again, but Leo, just lose the fucking accent. Because he's not pulling it off very well, in my opinion. But the other actors are pretty good in this movie. Teddy brings up Andrew Latis, played by Elias Koteas, whom I reviewed in the two of the 1990s Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles film, which happened to be 1 and 3, to Every Single Patient, and we'll see him later in the front with a missing eyeball and a scar on his face. But when he's brought up, I thought, who the fuck is that? As he isn't shown yet in this movie. As I'm 40 minutes into it, and the storm gets worse as Teddy and Chuck go in a church, and again we get flashbacks from World War II. And remind me, why are we going back and forth to World War II? Because to me, it's not necessary, as this movie's a little too long at 2 hours and 18 minutes. And some of the World War II flashbacks could be cut out of this movie. And back to my point of bringing up some people we haven't seen yet, Teddy brings up to Chuck about how he got George Noyce, played by Jackie Earle Haley, arrested as he's in prison. And why the fuck is Scorsese always bringing up people the audience will see later in the film, as it bothers me in this movie? The guards finds Teddy and Chuck and brings them to Dr. Cawley, to the point I made earlier, as this movie happens in pairs. Like Teddy and Chuck are always together, just like Dr. Cawley and Max von Sydow's character are in pairs as well. And there's 2 Rachels, which I'll talk about a little later. Rachel 1 has been found and is played by Emily Mortimer, as she acts like a psycho to Teddy. And Rachel 1 brings up her husband Jim, as she says to Teddy, as Jim, you're dead, and says she buried him in the sea, which confused me half to fucking death. And Teddy looks pale as he's having a migraine, and this is when the movie spoiled the twist for me, because Dr. Cawley gives Teddy some pills while Chuck holds on to him like he's insane, which was not only way too convenient, but it was so goddamn obvious that Teddy is insane. It just got so telegraphed it wasn't funny. We see Andrew Latis in Teddy's imagination, and that scene, it was a what the fuck moment, as he sees Chuck and Rachel 1 killing her children after she screams, and this makes no goddamn sense whatsoever, and that is something I can never put together in my fucking mind, as it's too fucked up. We see Dolores visiting Teddy as she's giving him very good advice throughout the movie, sure, but he says, why so wet, baby? Which will come back later in the film, but it'll make sense then, but it doesn't now. And that's a real problem. To start something in a news segment, Teddy and Chuck go into Ward C, as they're getting treated like prisoners, and I thought, ugh, this is turning into something rather shitty. A prisoner tags Teddy and says as Teddy tries to find him, and the patient finds him and chokes him, as Chuck finds him, and Teddy almost chokes the life out of him. And some guard says to Teddy to take a walk. As he does, he lights up a light and finds George Noyce, and have a brief word with Teddy about how he put George in prison in the first place. As Andrew Latis as Teddy is being called Andrew Latis for half the movie, and Dolores enters in his imagination as George says she's fucking with you, as he needs to let her go, and he says, you'll never get off this island. And it's going to remind me of the ending line that Teddy will say at the end of the film, but I'll save it for then. Teddy goes to a mountain with Chuck to get the lighthouse, as Teddy wants to go alone, And he does go alone and almost falls and sees rats coming out of a hole from the mountain. And Teddy goes in a hole with Rachel 2, played by Patricia Clarkson, as he gets warm. And this is the third pair with Rachel 1, but Rachel 2 tells the story of the original Manchurian Candidate, which I watched for the first time in November of last year when the election was going on. And that movie, from what I remembered, was pretty damn good. I might review that someday, as I'm not sure about it right now, or what my future will be like by the next election year. And the character was rather tedious, and she was very hard to believe as far as her acting is concerned, as the twist is very predictable. Now, after she brings up the pills versus cigarettes versus the food at the cafeteria, I mean, it's now that predictable. I mean, Jesus Christ. Rachel, too, kicks Teddy out of the hole, and the next morning, and Teddy gets up on top of the mountain and gets a ride from the warden, who happens to be played by Ted Levine, who is very well known for playing Buffalo Bill in Silence of the Lambs, which I'll review later this year, as he tells Teddy about violence, as he says we're all violent men. And again, what the fuck is this? Because not everyone is violent in this world. Teddy gets back to the hospital, and Dr. Cawley chats with Teddy and thinks he's delusional. And we've got at least 40 minutes of movie left, so the twist will be coming soon, and it's obvious that, but it's better than anything M. Night Shyamalan does in his movies, like The Visit, The Happening, and his recent film, Old, as I don't like all of those films, as this one is obvious, but it's sort of better than what M. Night does in those fucking movies. But don't get me wrong, there's a few of his films I really like. For example, The Sixth Sense, Split, Glass. But there are a few times of his that are mediocre, but the rest of them are really bad. But let's get to the point of the movie. Teddy is led to believe Chuck is tortured and killed, and I'm calling bullshit at this point, as it's all in his fucking imagination, as he blows up a car while Dolores and one of his daughters, or kids I'll say, are almost blown up. Well, yeah, it was a daughter. What the fuck am I talking about? Almost gets blown up, but it doesn't affect them because they're ghosts. And Teddy goes to the lighthouse and takes a gun from a guard, and as he enters, he sees Dr. Cawley, who says to him, "Why so wet, baby?" As he sits and listens to the twist that is Andrew Latis, who happens to be Teddy's real identity, as Chuck comes in as Dr. Let me see if I'm saying this right. Shaheen, I think? I don't know. As he was in the hospital for the last 2 years, and we learned something that I already learned a long time ago, which is he's delusional. And his real name is Andrew Latis, and I saw that coming for like the last hour, which is super goddamn obvious. And Scorsese needs to make another horror film needs to not make any more horror films after Cape Fear and this thing, as they're both pretty bad films in my opinion. And the twist is as bad as M. Night's recent film Old, and I predicted it, some of it, since the first brought it up, a light in that film. But let's get to the ending of this movie. And I knew that he was insane for a little over an hour of the film. Andrew grabs the gun that was brought by Teddy, and he shoots Dr. Cawley, as it doesn't have bullets in it, as it was a toy, and he faints, as we learn the kids were drowned by his wife Dolores. And he kills her by shooting her in the stomach. Well, yeah, something like that. And Andrew gets out of the hospital and says a line that I brought up earlier in the show, which is the final line of the movie, as Andrew says, "You either live a terrible person or die a good man." And that stuck with me after I believe my second viewing of the movie with my mother and sister at the time. And honestly, it stuck with me then, and it sticks with me now. But at the end of the day, I knew the twist was coming after a little over an hour into the movie. And that's not a good sign at the end of the day. Now it's time for the rating. I'll give this movie a 4.1 out of 10. As It is better than The Aviator, and the twist is better than the bad M. Night Shyamalan films, but I knew it was coming after an hour into the movie, with an exception of Leo. And with an exception of Leo, the performances are good as this movie is well made, but at the end of the day, I didn't really like the film, as I wish it was better than what I think of it now. Scorsese directed this fine, but there were times the movie looked like a green screen, as came in excited to watch the film, but at the end of the day, I was very disappointed in the film. This at times kept me think of M Night movies with the twist that were so awful it left me very pissed off, as this movie is very disappointing, as this is a disappointment to the end of the movies. And like I said at the beginning, I already reviewed The Wolf of Wall Street, and I'm not going to do it again because I did it after the Wall Street retrospective series. So you can look for it from that point on. So I'd like to thank you guys for joining me for this Martin Scorsese, Leonardo DiCaprio retrospective. And until next time, you either live a terrible person or die a good man.